Hey everyone! Welcome back to the Occult Reject. This episode, I'm very happy to have both these on. Today I have with me, I got JJ Vance, and I do have Lisa with me. Most people probably have no idea who the hell Lisa is unless they're a fan, and they've maybe noticed the way she spells her name might be the same way that she spells it in other social media that's associated with the Occult Rejects. But you will see more of her going forward. She has been on episodes that have been pre-recorded and just not out yet. So the people live right now will have no idea who she is. But she is a fan that is also very much obsessed with the whole smiley face killer thing. And I did send a bunch of info because she wanted to, I guess, see me cover the topic. And then one day, JJ Vance happened. Me and him just happened to get into contact with each other, and he is a plethora of information on the smiley face killers. So then I reached out to Lisa, said instead of me just regurgitating your notes, how about you just jump on the show and join us? And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce, both guests. JJ Vance, I'll let you first. What is up, and let everybody know who you are.
Well, Nick, I appreciate the offer to come on and discuss the smiley face killers today. And Lisa, it's nice to meet you. I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely.
I host the Operation GCD podcast. That's Operation Garbage Can Dude. It's kind of my smart ass way of saying that I live in the garbage can world. And sometimes you get a little bit of that trash on you at times. I bill it as a shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude, and it's just I'm a storyteller, so I like to tell various stories, historical. I tend to get into secret societies and parapolitical activities. Those are sort of my focuses, and one of the underlying currents of my podcast and many series of my podcasts is the mounds, the ancient architecture that has littered the country of America. We call them what we now call America, but has been here for, depending on who you talk to, between 3,000 and 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm. That's actually another topic. Not to fuck up your interest in letting everybody know. But that's actually another topic me and you slightly talked about that I had thought about us both covering in the future as well.
Yeah, happy to come back and talk about mounds anytime. We often call them Indian burial mounds or Indian effigy mounds or just Indian mounds. That's kind of a misnomer in the respect that many of the actual Indian tribes, I'm part Cherokee, this being one of the Indian tribes, they'll tell you that they're not the ones who built these mounds. But many of these tribes have.
Well, now the Mormons are trying to say they did.
Right. Well, the Mormons love mounds too. There's a lot of organizations, the Freemasons, the Jesuits. A lot of folks love mounds to build their structures on top of these locations.
I mean, technically, I'm making fun of it, but like when we were recently, when we were covering stuff in the eye, I was reference, occult symbolism in the eye. I do reference back to, the fuck is that? The Fire and Ice, Game of Thrones. I do reference back to certain things with that, and I showed as a joke. I was showing like part of the intro that I thought was showing the pupil and the sclera of the eye, but the church was built on top of a spiraling mound in the beginning of it, which I didn't even realize then. And like you're talking the spiraling mounds, and I'm like, even fucking Game of Thrones was showing castles built on these spiraling mounds.
It sounds like a very Knights Templar thing to do. The Templar used to do that.
Yeah.
There's a number of Templar Vance Knights of Clan Vance of my peoples that built on mounds over in England and Scotland.
Okay. Nice. Oh, so and you I know you have also you gave me a fuck ton of links that I had assumed some of those were also where you might be like getting some of your information from. But
those are some good resources, a lot of the old data that was collected over the last 20 plus years on the topic that is still available for people to reference.
Gotcha. So for the people being live, I do have his links in the bottom, and there is a few I didn't put all of those because just time and what I was trying to do. I couldn't copy and paste all of them, but I included a bunch of links too that have information on the that we're going to be talking about. So all his stuff is in the bottom right now, and it will be when the episode drops for podcasting. So thank you again, JJ Vance, for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. And Lisa, I know again you don't have your own show. You're just a researcher, and then maybe I'll ask you first, and then we'll go into JJ Vance. What was it that even got you interested in the Smiley Face Killers? And the reason I'm even asking you that is because when you sent me that folder you shared with me, I looked at it and I was like, "This is a lot." So it's obviously something you're actually very into.
Yeah. So I was a little obsessed with William Ramsey, and so I've heard a majority of all his podcasts that he's put out, and one in particular obviously caught my attention was the Smiley Face Killers. And he did extensive work on it. I watched the video or documentary he put out and kind of just put it in the back of my mind. And then it wasn't until this year, around February, March, that you start to hear chatter of young men being recovered in the lake here in Austin. And so it was kind of like, that's odd, and of course, a lot of the city is downplaying the incidents. And so it just basically sparked my interest. But then come April, when 2 more were recovered and they were linking it to having a similar MO to the SFK, I was like, no, there's more here. I mean, college town, water, males. And so I started to look into it, and sure enough, the MO's right there. And so I started digging, and that's pretty much how I got started on that.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I guess it's not cool that it's happening around you.
Oh,
I guess that's cool that it might actually you're into it because it could literally be happening in front of your face.
Right. It's in our backyard. Yeah. So I've just kind of collected as, time goes on, just different things. I do go down to the trail a lot to go walk and run and stuff. So it was something that I had been doing already, in that been visiting Lakeburg Lake Trail.
You don't want to be a statistic.
Yeah. I don't think I fit the MO though, but
that's true. Yeah. Make sure your hair's down and don't put it up in a bun.
Yeah.
Or in a hat. They might think you're good. But then again, with the way today is, I mean, listen, if you happen to find somebody who's a Smiley Face Killer who's also into QAnon, they're just going to assume you have a dick anyway, and they're going to kill you. So
that's pretty funny. Yeah. No. But and I had been frequenting the trail, but not on the side where all of the bodies are being recovered, but on the opposite end, and been going down there since, I don't know, maybe 2011, 2012. And so you hear about things all the time, and people hype it up or they don't hype it up, or it's downplayed, and so forth. So this was something of interest to me because I frequent the area. So.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely been an uptick there at Lady Bird Lake in Austin.
Yeah, there has. I don't know.
No, good.
No. I don't know how familiar you are with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar
about it.
No, okay. I haven't looked into the cases too deeply. I mean, I'm aware of I think it was maybe 8 bodies now, 8 victims.
This year it is 5, I believe. 4,
and then 8, I think, over the last 4 or 5 years.
So the how they're categorizing it begins in 2008 all the way up until this year. So it's running for about 15 years.
Right.
And the majority of them, of the bodies recovered that have been the most, have been in the last few years. So 2018 was the year where they had the most bodies recovered. And I believe that was 6 bodies recovered.
Yep.
And then it was 3 after, and then it was 5 the year after that, and then 5 this year.
Okay. Well, that's more than I was tracking.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, good. Finish. I didn't want to interrupt you. Good.
No. Just that it's been a total of 30 bodies that have been recovered since 2008.
Wow.
And of the 30, 14 are unidentified bodies, or unidentified males. So it's nearly half, but they're placing them within that 30 because of the way that they're found or the way that they're being recovered.
Sure.
It's very similar to the way the other ones are being found.
That makes sense. I did see one of them that I wouldn't have lumped in there, and it was a Palestinian man who was running a children's charity, I believe is what it was.
That was in 2008.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2008. Yeah, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That one didn't seem to fit the details of any regard. I mean, he was in
No,
his 50s or late 40s. He was
that
found.
one was. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, he was found with his hands and feet bound, I believe, and his eyes and mouth duct taped or something like that.
Yeah. So
And they ruled it a
everything was
suicide?
duct tape. Go ahead.
No, it said, and they ruled it a suicide after they had it. You know, they find the victim found in the water like that. I mean,
Yeah.
not only does that not really speak to suicide, it
Right.
doesn't really fit the MO of the smiley face
No.
killers.
It doesn't. If you read into it, I think a lot of it was that he was found in the lake. The fact that it was ruled a suicide, and yet all of what was found on the autopsy was completely off. The other, but you're right. His hands and feet were bound in front of him with duct tape, and his face and eyes were bound with duct tape as well.
Okay.
And but they ruled it a suicide. And he was, he kind of had been under investigation by the FBI, and I
I was
believe,
going to say, yeah, there was FBI stuff going on.
yeah, his house had been seized 2 months prior to that, and according to neighbors, that there were other activities where FBI was still coming in and seizing information and stuff like that. But he was I think he was doing a lot of work for the Palestinian children.
Yep, that's what I read.
So yeah.
Yeah,
That was in
in
2008.
cases like that, I agree they are suspicious, but I wouldn't. I know that case is often lumped into these other, drowning college age men, smiley face killer MO deaths.
Right.
I just they're not just in Austin. There's other cities that kind of lump in some similar
Right.
cases. They may not
Right.
need to go there, but overall, there's still, even if you exclude those cases, there's still 300 plus men
Right.
that have fallen victim to this smiley face killer style phenomenon. Many of which have been confirmed to be met foul play or homicide, despite the official, decisions
Right.
made by authorities.
Right. I mean, any way you look at it, it's very nefarious.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's questionable all the way around.
Yeah, I just
Imagine what it was is that the smiley face itself is an occult symbol, and it holds so much power. For all you know, it could be a symbol for death, and then that's why these things just happen there. I mean, I know that's fucking wild and crazy to think of, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, how do we know, like, those things weren't actually just spray painted and somehow just through the fucking mathematics of the universe, that's where that person ended up dying and getting drowned. Like, I know it's
I wouldn't rule that out. Yeah.
It's just who the fuck.
No, absolutely. That's very, very possible because of the amount. So on Ladybird Lake, that it's kind of known for its graffiti. People go out there and they graffiti the bottoms of bridges or what have you. And the graffiti is amazing. I mean, it's beautiful artwork and so forth. But yeah, you don't know if they had done it before, prior to dumping the body, and then, or if they did it after, or so forth. But I think at least here in Austin, there is a group or a coalition that goes around and spray paints or paints over graffiti on a weekly basis. So there is that contention. And then the other thing that, in listening to a couple of the interviews from Gannon and Ramsey and all that, it's not just the smiley face that is attributed to the killings, that there are, 10 to 20 different symbols or sigils that are associated with it.
Right. I believe it's about a dozen. And from my understanding of comments from Detective Gannon, who was the, one of the initial, detectives on this theory, NYPD homicide retired detective Gannon, he stated that the reason why they know that a victim found in water under these circumstances is a smiley face killer victim from this cult, this nationwide cult and possibly worldwide cult, is because there's variations of those dozen symbols. So they'll have the smiley face and they'll have like 2 of the other dozen symbols that go with it, because this is some sort of language being communicated amongst the organization.
And it's associated with that location. In that sigil, those sigils itself are specific to that location of that site. And then obviously if they go to Chicago, there's the sigils associated with that site. And they were mentioning how they were talking. It's almost like they're talking back and forth to each other, or taking credit through symbolism and sigils.
I would agree with that statement, Lisa. There seems to be some sort of communications and bravado involved in this.
Absolutely. Absolutely bravado.
The impetus behind the graffiti.
I totally.
And
agree with
I've
that.
seen some of these. I don't know if it's the same symbols that I've ever spoken with Detective Gannon or Professor Gilbertson. I've investigated on my own time a number of cases here in Ohio and specifically Cincinnati area. And I've seen a number of other graffiti symbols besides the smiley face at some of these locations. So and some of them look really fresh too. So
Yes.
I have to assume that these are potential symbols that are being used. I've never, I don't think I've shared even any of the photographs or other symbols that I've seen with too many other people. But in my mind, they're very likely some of the same symbols that Detective Gannon and Gilbertson and their team have found.
Right. And I think a lot of it too was to eliminate the possibility of copycats. And so that if something happens, you have immediately people flooding to the area trying to put up, what they think are sigils or whatever. But if they see these sigils that they have not released to the public, then they know, okay, this is legit. This is associated with that. I believe that was the whole reason behind not revealing what the other symbols were.
And that's a standard procedure in law enforcement. Just they call them polygraph keys. Only the perpetrator of the crime will know this. If you bring them in for interviews or polygraphs or questioning. The other reason I think that Detective Gannon and Professor Gilbertson and team cited was, and it's kind of where the name Smiley Face Killer comes from. It's a misnomer of sorts, kind of applied by the media. So when Professor Gilbertson first convened some of his grad students at the university there, I believe it's in St. Cloud, Minnesota, they put together kind of a research project on some of these early drownings in the 1999 through 2002 timeframe. And the local media, he had a news reporter come out before and do reports when he'd done projects with his students. He did it again, had a media come out, and they're the ones who applied the name the Smiley Face Killers, and it kind of just stuck.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't think they weren't intentionally trying to portray it that way.
I had assumed that it started because of the 1997 initial thing with the graffiti next to the first victim that Gannon found. So, I had no idea that it was the media that had actually given it that moniker.
I'm glad you just brought that up right now, Lisa. And I interrupt, but I did want to ask.
No, go ahead.
And you kind of just stepped on it a little bit. I think it might have been Vance that I was talking to you. Maybe I'm just confused because of the names, because I know there are a lot of names, and I haven't really watched something or listened to something like Face Killers in probably a few months. But I thought that you might have mentioned something about who you thought or who was the first victim. For some reason, it wasn't a name that caught my attention.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Was it the same person she mentioned, or is there a victim one that you might think is someone else?
No, I mean, Lisa's correct. I generally refer to Patrick McNeil as the victim zero.
All right. I wasn't sure if that was the same person that you told me.
Yeah, same person, same victim. It was 1996 New Year's Eve, I believe.
Yes.
New Year's Eve? Yes. 96, yeah. So, January 1st, 1997, essentially. Because the following New Year's, disregard one. I believe Patrick McNeil disappeared in February and was gone about 60 days, 90 days, I think 70 days before his body was found in the East River in Owl's Head Bay over in Brooklyn, which is like 12 miles away from where he disappeared in Manhattan.
Yeah.
By Fordham University. Almost 1 year later, precisely,
right.
Larry Andrews, a second victim, disappeared from, I believe it was more like the Garment District, kind of Empire State Building area of Midtown Manhattan. And I haven't been to Manhattan in years, but I used to be a regular at McSorley's Irish Pub there. So I do know the area fairly well. So, you have one guy way up north towards like the Bronx, Fordham University. He disappears, ends up in the East River and 12 miles away in Owl's Head Bay, Brooklyn. And almost a year precisely later, Larry Andrews on New Year's Eve, 1997, I believe he was a New Year's Eve victim. There's a lot of New Year's Eve victims, a lot of Halloween victims, but Larry Andrews winds up in the same exact spot as Patrick McNeil did almost 1 year later. Yeah. And they both disappeared from Manhattan. And they had Detective Gannon, I believe it's mentioned in the drowning case studies and drowning in forensics textbook. And I believe they mentioned in there that they had the water team from the NYPD water team detect the currents and see where things were flowing. And they determined there was no way possible that either one of those men should have ever ended up in Alice Head, Brooklyn.
Right. And I think they didn't even have the markings, right? Because like usually
No.
when bodies are dragged, when they sink to the bottom, they didn't have the markings of
No, they
being
didn't. Yeah.
moved. Yeah.
That's a good point. Because when you're, especially when you're somewhere like the East River, which is not a clean river, a lot of stuff in that river, a lot of things floating around in there, a lot of things get caught up in. So when they find these bodies, that is a key factor in determining that this was murder or foul play had occurred here and was a homicide. And the other one is, when you have victims gone, especially as long as these guys were gone in especially some of the earlier cases, and continues on today and some of the more recent cases with like James. But these folks are gone. These men are missing. They go missing out drinking. They go missing, and they're gone 60 days, 70 days, some 40 days, and but they don't exhibit signs of decomposition commensurate with being gone that long.
Right. Right.
Decomposition happens fairly quickly in the water.
Right.
I mean, it's signs of decomposition.
Right.
Common signs are skin slippage, where the skin, especially around your nails or your scalp, it starts separating.
Right.
There's another common one is which was present in Patrick McNeil's case, was the fly larvae. He had fly larvae in his groin area.
Yeah.
The fly had hatched, laid eggs that are in his groin area, which can only occur, I believe it's over like 50 degrees Fahrenheit. 50 degrees or something like that.
Oh.
And the water there was like
interesting.
40 degrees.
Yeah. And the water was below that. Yeah.
Now I don't know
So there's
how
no way
animals.
possible that the flies could have laid the eggs there. Is what I'm saying. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, see, there you go. That might actually kind of answer what I was thinking just now. I was going to say, I don't know how fish or aquatic things in the water are, but if you were to leave like a body in the woods and there was wildlife around, there's a good chance they're actually probably going to get the fucking dick off before they start.
Oh, you're going to have predation from all sorts of creatures in the woods for sure.
That's what I'm saying. So what I'm thinking is like, could you have gotten the flies there because something already chewed away and ate that off? It was outside. Flies came, laid their little fucking eggs, and now this motherfucker got tossed in the water. Or whatever.
I mean, it's an interesting thought.
Like you would have to wonder about the flies, and that missing. Could that have been done by wildlife in a wooded area first?
Oh, you're saying did he lay in a wooded area before he's put in water?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why his genitals were possibly eaten off for all you fucking know.
Yeah, that's most likely. Yeah. I presume, I've never personally done it, but I presume if you just like the conditions you're going to find outside, if you were to leave a body indoors somewhere, you're going to have the fly larvae are still going to be laying the eggs.
Correct. Yeah.
So some of that, it's not necessarily an indoor-outdoor thing, but
that's part of the MO, is that the bodies that are found in water are found floating. And so when they're found floating, usually from what I've read, usually when you have an accidental drowning, the body will sink, and it'll sink for, I believe, a few days.
Correct.
And then once all of the enzymes and everything start degrading and everything after a few days, then it will float. You have to, bloat to float or something.
You're
and so
on.
then you have all of that, extensions of all God knows what. And then you're found floating. However, most of these bodies are floating, but that there is no bloating and there's no, puffing up. So there's that whole that they were unalived, or they were killed somewhere else and not in that. A couple of the things that I read on some of the autopsies that have been made public of the victims that have been found is that their total lung weight is not consistent with that of the total lung weight of victims of accidental drowning in freshwater or saltwater.
Sure.
And they're actually underweight for even normal lungs of total weight.
That's another good point. Yeah.
So there's that whole, and that's part of the MO, in that their lungs are not taking in water because they're possibly not alive at the time of being placed in water.
No, you're spot on. I mean, sometimes some victims have no water in their lungs. So
Correct.
How authorities reach the determination that they drowned is a different story altogether. I tend to attribute that to the law enforcement concept of path of least resistance. It's a very common concept, hammered into you from early, as a former law enforcement officer myself. That was very, pounded into my head as far as the concept to understand and incorporate from day one. So you can kind of, while the concept in general is more of a tactical concept, and as far as the application of operations in law enforcement, it does get applied to like administrative functions and everything else too, because it just becomes entrenched within the mindset. So I think a lot of that, it's the path of least resistance. This kid drowned. We found him in a river. He was out drinking. He drowned. No other questions. And sometimes there are no other questions. They don't always order an autopsy unless the families are ordering additional testing. The liver tissue is not getting tested for GHB, which GHB has turned out, and I believe again in Gilbertson state that it's 100% of their cases that they've had the families tested for GHB, roughly 24, 100% GHB in every victim.
But I think he was indicating that they were testing liver samples, and I wonder how much of it is that the GHB that is being tested by MEs is via blood. And I believe GHB has a half-life of 6 to 12 hours. So if they're gone, if they're gone more than 12 hours, you're not going to pick it up, I believe, in that amount of time in the bloodstream. Now, if you do a liver sample or hair sample, I don't know. I don't know what the metabolic rate in terms of all that, how soon it would show up on the liver. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I think they have a much more extended period of time to test the liver. You're right. And GHB is naturally produced to very minute levels in the human body. It's not; these are not minute levels we're talking about here. These are exponentially high levels. And explain, the drunken state of appearance of a lot of these victims. For example, I had a friend of mine in high school. We were at one of our friends' houses, partying, drinking, etc. And he was digging through the medicine or the cupboards in the kitchen looking for some more liquor, and discovered a bottle that turned out not to be liquor. Turned out to be a bottle of GHB. He drank the entire thing. We had to get him to the ER. He fought like 8 nurses and doctors. They had to strap him down to a bed. I mean, he had huge superhuman strength from it. He didn't remember a thing. I mean, he was totally blacked out, but still functional to a certain degree. But it does give it a very strong appearance of being very drunk. It's extremely inebriated. If you see somebody who's on GHB, and GHB, the reason why there was a bottle of it in my friend's folks' kitchen cupboards was because they're professional bodybuilders. And GHB is a very common supplement used in professional bodybuilding because it assists with the recovery of muscle, the time frame that muscles recover.
Had no idea.
Very.
I had heard that GHB is now being used recreationally.
That's true too.
So
that shit was 20 years ago, fucking 25 years ago, when I was like 18, 19, and 20, I could have fucking GHB anytime I wanted when I went to a rave. Shit's been around. It just depends on like how does society deem it? Is it okay to take? Is it a cool drug yet?
Yep.
It's been around.
That's where I experienced it too. Like when I was under 21 or in the military. For example, I was down in San Antonio for the police academy. I remember going down the Riverwalk. I was a day over 18, maybe not even 18 yet, because I joined when I was 17, and we were at one of the dance clubs down there. I was with a group of friends, and some of them were taking like a water bottle. Someone had a water bottle and like a capful. They were taking like capfuls of the GHB if you're under 21 because they stamp your hands so you can't get a drink in the club. That was their way of still partying in the club. Wow. So
you guys ever hear of? Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I was just saying I definitely encountered it in that club environment, that rave environment.
Oh yeah, for sure. Did you ever hear of DJ Keoki?
Oh yeah, the Benihana guy. He's the son of the guy that owned Benihana's. The federal.
He was also really cool with like oh fuck, who was that kid? Macaulay Culkin ended up playing like some unknown movie. Ended up playing
the Party Monster.
Yeah. It was like kind of. But I had seen him a few times. I knew people on the rave scene that was close with him. I knew a bunch of gay people, and they were really cool with him. That was in the rave scene because I'm pretty sure Keoki was gay himself. He was like the first like left before they were cool, I guess.
I'm sorry. Are you saying Keoki or Aoki? Maybe I'm thinking
No,
of a different-
Kiyoki, DJ Kiyoki.
Oh, okay.
You're
I'm thinking
playing.
of DJ
Aoki. Yeah, totally
Totally
different.
case, okay. So not the Benihana guy then.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know about Benihana, but I knew he was.
No, DJ
associated with
Aoki's
it.
father was the Benihana guy.
Oh no, Kiyoki.
Yeah, I don't know DJ Kiyoki. That's a different
I mean,
one.
he was good enough to where he donned himself DJ Superstar Kiyoki.
Okay.
But he was huge for a while. But like I knew some people that were close to him, kind of, and he played somewhere that I was actually at, and I was like able to like hang out near where he was fucking playing. And this fucking dude literally had a squirt water bottle of GHB, and this motherfucker's just squirting shit in his mouth as he's playing.
Good Lord.
Like, yo,
wow.
Because the thing is I think you can actually build a tolerance to it. So like
no
he
doubt.
was using it so oftenly that this motherfucker's literally as he's fucking mixing and getting twisted in his leather fucking outfit, like looking like a gimp from fucking what was that fucking movie Pulp Fiction. I mean, the guy's DJing looking like that, fucking drinking fucking GHB like it's iced tea. So I mean, the shit was huge back one point.
Yeah, that Party Monster situation was a big murderous situation around the rave scene there in New York City, was it not?
Yeah.
That shit was huge.
Yeah.
So it was funny when I heard about it being a date drug. I was like, but like, there was like hundreds of people like raving and dancing on this shit.
Right.
Last week, and now it's a date rape drug. I'm like, holy fuck! I had no idea. Like, I guess I didn't know. Weird. Just, it's been around.
Yeah, but I mean, just that scene, that kind of electronic music scene.
The EDM,
Yeah, EDM. That's kind of where the smiley face symbol is used as a kind of a chaos symbol, it seems.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because there is an underground EDM rave techno or industrial scene not too far from Rainy Street where all of the
interesting
the men are disappearing from.
Yeah, and a number of these victims down there in Austin are also gay men, right? There are also at least a few of them have been confirmed to just be gay men.
I believe there was only one or two that out of the 30.
Okay.
If maybe just one, but I believe all of them. Again, limited reporting. Limited. Right. Nobody knows anything in terms of associations with, if they were the ones that were known, they were with groups of people. Sure. And then they were seen walking away or grabbing an Uber or being refused alcohol at the next bar that they were at because they were acting erratic, and then they would take off in this, fit or whatever. But in terms of the homosexuality, that I don't know, but from what I've read, a majority were heterosexual.
Okay. There's been an uptick in that activity amongst the gay communities.
Right.
A number of victims have been from that community.
Yeah.
This is kind of almost making me think a little bit about something I did want to ask before. I mean, real quick, we're just kind of like talking about raves, and you even said smiley face. Raves, this is just my opinion, and I'm not saying all of them. And when I say this is not meaning it's good or bad. I'm just blanket term. I do think rave electronic music is deeply occulted, or some people who are into it. As a DJ, I do DJ. I have made a few mixes. I DJ'd for years over the past, on and off.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing it more now. And like I even plan on streaming it out. I'm going to start doing live mixes that I'll actually stream out. Nice. I will tell you, I'm always transparent, so I'm going to tell on myself again. These DJ, the mixes that I'm doing, first off, in my head, it's somehow it's a story on the Tree of Life. My DJ mixes are like that. I'll tell you straight up, it is an occult story. It meant something to me. And 90% of the artists that I am using, if I was to show you their album cover, or if you knew the name of the track, you would know off the bat they're fucking occultists as well.
Yeah.
This is everywhere. So
I
you're
agree.
saying like, and why I'm going on about this is because now I have wondered with the smiley face killers. I'm sure all three can agree it's not one fucking group doing it everywhere.
Right.
Like you said, different people. Maybe that's why there's different symbols, because there's that flavor did it, and this flavor over here did it this day. You know what? You know what I'm that kind of flair. But I do start to question, and it's because of just the fact of being able to move around a lot and nobody knowing who the fuck you really are. I have questioned circuses. I have questioned, and I know I spoke to you this earlier, bar bands, or maybe some of those weird bands that play at pizza places. Weird fucking bands like that, when they do their fucking no-name tours around.
They were definitely, they had some occult bands of that Comet pizza.
Yeah. And just
like small bands you've never heard of, obscure names.
That's what I'm saying. Like those obscure bands that nobody really knows about, but they do their little tours. They make their couple of bucks. Or even now thinking about it, raves. You have people that may not necessarily be living in that area playing. That nobody knows. You're fucking nobody except for the fucking kid in that club, or you know what I'm saying? You could be Joe Blow, you could be DJ Joey Jeep. Nobody knows who the fuck he is, but he's a decent DJ. Yeah. He plays at places. Sure. Do you think everybody knows what the fuck he looks like? You know what I'm saying? Like you could have people that are from all over the place, being in areas that they're normally not supposed to, that nobody knew they were fucking really there. Nobody can say, "Oh yeah, I saw so and so there." I was just Joey Jeep in the fucking DJ booth. Nobody knows I'm fucking Mike so-and-so. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like how especially with these bands and fucking carnies. Who the fuck's going to pay attention to some fucking weirdo that's there to set up a fucking carnival?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, Nick.
I do wonder about those things. Like, can these people that are traveling around even be doing like that?
Well, it would be beneficial to commit the crime because no one's going to be wondering where you were, why you left, why you were acting strange.
You disappeared into society. Especially like carnival people or like those bands that are like you're not seen really, even though you're being seen, you're not. You know what I'm getting at? Like,
absolutely. And to speak to your point on the occult nature of music, I think you're spot on there because, and I'll just give you one example. Have either of you all ever been familiarized or read the Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon book by Dave McGowan?
Yes,
I've heard of the book.
Great book. He goes over kind of the manufactured history and state of the hippie rock counterculture of the 1960s and how it erupted out of the Hollywood Hills and how it had all these occult influences.
I think we got Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just think I think a lot of stuff with electronic music. I think to an extent, I think that was created so it was easier to hit certain octaves and tones that would make us react than natural instruments can do. So just like that.
Speaking of octave and tones. Yeah, no, I agree with you. But my point on the
oh shit, and I'm fucking live. I may have to sign for that package. Fuck. If you can, please. Actually, this is crazy. Can you actually? I'll just have to go for 2 to make sure that's not for me.
Yeah.
And you guys take over the show. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No.
So I'll just finish my point on the music scene. So I recently I used to operate a website, operationgcd.com. I don't any longer. But I'm turning a lot of the written series that I did on that website into podcasts. And I just 2 weeks ago I published the first one in a series I call Smells Like Laurel Canyon, because Laurel Canyon was the Dave McGowan book, and it's what I've done is I've extrapolated kind of the salient characteristics, core concepts that he identified, that McGowan identified in the 1960s countercultural movement out of hippie rock in Los Angeles, and I applied those concepts to the 1990s grunge rock countercultural movement out of Seattle, and it fits perfectly.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Just the general concepts, the salient characteristics from two music scenes, 30 years apart, essentially. And, one of the highlights of those core concepts or salient characteristics is the occult nature and occult connections. And
Right.
It's not limited or minute. It's very heavy. It's a very strong undercurrent through both scenes.
Right.
And not necessarily directly connected to Seattle, but connected to that music scene is the industrial rock scene. Kind of derivative or corollary to the grunge rock scene, be it Nine Inch Nails, for
I was
example.
just gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, they're not the inventors of the industrial rock scene, but they're kind of the ones who made it more mainstream, right?
Okay.
The inventors of the industrial rock scene was a band, a UK band named Throbbing Gristle, and it was
Okay.
that was their idea was Nick knows what I'm
I've
talking
heard
about,
of them.
and that was the
Yeah,
idea was.
Did you? I hate to just interrupt right now,
Yeah,
but
go
just so I know,
Yeah, go
did you
ahead.
happen to bring up? Is this associated with the Commonplace?
I mean, in theory, it could be because.
No. I'm just making sure. No, for some reason I was
no.
thinking of that, and I don't mind if we bring that up. It's just don't say the whole word all at once because I've gotten my channel taken down without strikes.
Understood.
Because of bringing up that fucking place. That's why all that pizza.
Got it. Not a problem.
No, I'm just saying going forward, try to with that topic. I hate censoring myself. Believe me, I do. It's just I don't want to my YouTube over that fucking asshole. You know,
I understand.
Striking it that brings up his name or his fucking pizza place. So just talking code. Sorry for the interruption. I thought we were.
No, I am glad you brought that up because I mean I generally view that establishment as being thelemic in nature, being the parties that are involved with it at least are members of some sort of thelemic organization, some thelema offshoot.
Yeah, I've shown people. I forgot the name of the band. That's why I was wondering if it was that band that you mentioned. It was in our Shriners or maybe our Quetzalcoatl series. I can't remember what it was by Quetzalcoatl. I think there was a band that actually recorded their video inside that place. And there's a few times you catch motherfuckers wearing a fez hat in the crowd.
Interesting.
I was like,
that I was not aware of.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of those videos from like the basement area there.
Oh yeah, this one it was actually done like in the restaurant area.
Oh, okay.
They were showing people sitting down too, and that was like another thing. They had like a rabbit sitting on the fucking table, like a stuffed up rabbit. Like obviously, the rabbit hole. You know, it's like all these occult things, like just randomly placed too, like as they were filming this video for a bit inside that place.
Yeah, that's interesting. And referencing your previous mention of Macaulay Culkin, he had connections to that place with his band Pizza Underground.
Yeah.
So,
and then the thing is, he tells you like, then he's with the whole rabbit ears and
I was to say, then you got the rabbit ears going with him.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It was just very, very weird video.
So there's definitely a lot of occult stuff going on in and around that place. But Throbbing Gristle, as I was pointing out while you were away, is the band that kind of invented industrial rock music. It was a UK band. They were taking kind of the punk rock and the electronic dance music scenes and kind of combining them into one music scene, which became this industrial rock scene. So they were kind of the forerunners or at the frontier of that scene. But really, who put industrial rock on the map was Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails.
Oh, no. See, I unfortunately, because I am just a Skinny Puppy fan, I might argue.
Well, yeah,
on that with
yeah, they were big too, but they were. I'm not sure if they were.
And they did have. I think that's where I got the whole Throbbing Gristle thing confused. Skinny Puppy put out an album called Puppy Gristle, I think. So that's probably where I was totally off. Yeah, but I'll put it this way. I'm just gonna leave it here. Trent Reznor opened up for Skinny Puppy and got booed a long time ago. So I'm just gonna leave it there.
Interesting.
Yes.
I know Skinny Puppy kind of on its face. Like I don't know much of their music, but as far as well, at least my perception of the industrial rock in the mainstream.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And in fact,
mainstream for sure.
Yeah, he produced some of the Throbbing Gristle folks. There's some of their later projects, right? Because they broke up and they did other projects. Christopherson, it's one of the individuals' names.
Yeah.
And then Genesis P-Orridge. So Genesis P-Orridge, Christopherson, Trent Reznor, they all got together in 1992, 1991 and made an EP album called Broken. And William Ramsey, he highlighted this in his Smiley Face Killers documentary, and I thought that's when he and I connected because we've done 3 or 4 or 5 podcasts on the Smiley Face Killers over the years. And it was after he did this documentary is when I reached out to him. I said, "You're spot on with this assessment," because what I think he did was capture in that Broken. It's an EP album and like a 30-minute music video, like kind of broken up into different music videos, is the project. And again, it's the Throbbing Gristle guys. It's Trent Reznor. They record it in the Manson family death house, or at least a portion of it, where Trent Reznor built a studio there in Laurel Canyon, or I'm sorry, Benedict Canyon. in the Hollywood Hills. So there's all the occult overtones there with the location that they're doing these things in, producing this music, the activities of the individuals involved. Genesis Peorage, I believe, is the self-proclaimed Process Church member. I get the Process Church disbanded 50 years ago, but this is, there are people still today claiming to be members of the Process, and I believe he recently died. I believe he was one of them. He was also, I believe, a transgendered individual. He was born a man, maybe still identified as a man, but got a breast implants. Odd character, Genesis Peorage. Very close friends with Damien Eccles of the West Memphis Three. This is something else William Ramsey has brought to the attention.
Right.
So you have more of the occult overtones going on there with that group, right? And that goes in all sorts of different directions. Marilyn Manson's involved in that inner circle between Johnny Depp and Damien Eccles and Joe Rogan's buddy Doug Stanhope, the comedian.
Yo, you know who was really close to Marilyn Manson?
Who's that?
Fucking Macho Man.
I did not know that.
Yeah, right. There's pictures of them like, hanging out and shit. Yeah.
Because I know one of his,
And listen. People may think I'm crazy. That shit. Now, I used to say, I don't know, it could be Vince McMahon or whoever's running the shit. But then if you watch these specials recently they've been putting out, a lot of these wrestlers, they really do make it sound like they actually come up with their own ideas and then pitch it. And, or a lot of these things, they actually write them, even their own outfits. I'm just going to say this, my opinion, and I'm including Macho Man as much as I love him. There were occultists wrestling.
I have no doubt.
Sound crazy.
Yeah.
Sound crazy.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
I mean,
I think it's
fucking
a large
Gold Dust.
club.
Fucking Gold Dust. Look at his fucking outfit.
Well, the Undertaker. How about that one?
Even the Ultimate Warrior. I hate to say it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a large, loosely knit club of different occult organizations that interact and kind of just underneath a layer of society that's on its we see on its surface. So unless you're in one of those clubs and attuned to that communities, the interlocking nature of those communities, I don't think that you're going to really realize it until you look deeper into it. I never even thought until just now that WWE had an occult, nature to some of its characters. But
I even think as crazy as it sounds, which I think is like, I'm like, am I watching like what the new wrestling is going to be? I'll admit it. I'm big into BattleBots. I love that show. I think it's fucking great. And, I do question, and, I'm like, am I watching it? Like, am me watching this, am I contributing to like this technical advancement that's going to wipe out fucking humanity? Like instead of wrestling, is it going to be BattleBots? Because like they're even like almost getting storylines in, the bad guy, the one who says the stupid shit on the mic after they win. Nice. It's like almost they're getting like, wrestling now. But like,
they have the heel bots.
There is outfits that these motherfuckers wear when they come out with their bots, these symbols and these color schemes that, in my opinion, I'm not, again, Scott thinks it's everywhere. That shit is even in fucking BattleBots, in my opinion.
That's interesting.
I mean, even if you look at the way the BattleBots logo is and that fucking ring is set up, it's to me, you're watching the power and the glory on the Kabbalah tree. Go at it.
Interesting. You're an individual that knows much about the occult, so that's something that I'm not familiar with. I'm glad you brought that up. I'll have to check that out. But in regards to just, especially rock music or music in general, relative to like Marilyn Manson, I believe he's he may not be a self-proclaimed Process member, but I know he's a self-proclaimed Church of Satan member.
Right.
And again, you have a weird, kind of connection with this group because Trent Reznor was the mentor of Marilyn Manson. They're both from Cleveland, Ohio, and I don't know about Trent Reznor's background, but Marilyn Manson's background fits the same MO as the Laurel Canyon scene rockers of the 1960s and the grunge rockers of the 1990s, late 80s, early 90s, whereas Manson was more like late 90s. But when I say he fits the same mold, his father was a Army officer, I believe, intelligence officer, which is a very common thread amongst all those previous rock and roll generations. So he's kind of cut from the same cloth in that regard. I don't remember Trent Reznor's background in that aspect, but I do find it interesting that you have these, self-proclaimed occultists doing these music videos and songs that seem to be of an occult nature. And what William Ramsey captured in his documentary was what I like to call kind of the psychosexual aspect of the crime. So in that Broken, they go around in the music video. They go around driving around town. The characters in the music video, they're doing this all to Nine Inch Nails music in the background, and they stalk a man walking down the street. They kidnap the man. They put him in like a gimp suit, like you were saying before, Nick, and they go through some sort of psychosexual water torture with the man before they kill him.
Yeah.
So that's captured in an industrial rock music video.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is some just random thought that popped in my head. You talk about a gimp suit. I mean, does anybody, like, as we're watching again Pulp Fiction, does anybody question why the fuck there's a guy with a gimp suit inside of a box somewhere?
Immediately when I saw it for the first time, I didn't watch the
game. Yeah, it's just like,
so random.
It's just it's just weird shit like that. Just makes you wonder.
It's a dark scene.
Yeah.
Are these all little snippets of the same event or same action going on, just different ways?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I could probably fill 30 minutes on what I find to be the occult undertones of Quentin Tarantino films. But
I mean, that whole thing is even. I mean, he goes in there, the Killian Red sign in the background, the lights are out. It says "Kill Ed," and then eventually after the fact, who's Zed, baby? Zed's dead. Like the whole Ed and Zed. Obviously, there's some fucking playoff with that because you're being shown shit like that throughout the scene.
Right.
That whole fucking movie is that I say this about so many movies, but that is a movie I do really want to cover too for the occult undertones. It's fucking. I hate to say it, I think it's amazing work for an occult story.
He's good. He writes a good tale. He's a good storyteller. I do appreciate Tarantino for that, and I like.
I think that's why he's so huge.
Yeah,
it's because he's very good at showing occultism to people without them knowing at all. That's why I think
a good point.
He's very well revered.
That's a very good point. I think there might be some validity to that.
And as much as I keep going about it now, again, when we're even talking about the eyes, I bring up stuff that I think has something to do with Nazism, because again, I think that is an actual just magic. We mentioned just Stephen King off the bat for a second, and I'm like, oh, apt pupil. That includes a Nazi.
Yep.
Who was I just fucking?
Yeah, very cold. Very cold. A lot of occult and Stephen King stuff. A lot of occult.
And then wait, fuck! I just had a brain fart. Who was I just talking about before I said that? Yeah.
Tarantino.
Because Tarantino, Inglourious Bastards. Something else about Nazis. It's just what I'm saying. What is fucking what Kanye fucking West gets kicked off of Twitter because they're just showing there's something up with that shit. It's magic.
Well, it's good point,
people
Nick.
don't know.
People
don't want motherfuckers to know that.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Process Church, for example, they had a high veneration for the Nazis and the SS in general, or the SS and the Nazis in general. So
I mean, even go back to fucking theosophy. I mean, you got the fucking Aryans and the blue eyes there.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was actually going to mention theosophy next. So when I try to take in the overall occult umbrella of activities, that could be related to smiley face killer activities, the phenomenon in general, I do find it to be an operational group. Operational being they're highly trained to move and communicate with one another in accomplishing these operations. Maybe that's just my training that I have in my history from 20 years in the military police, SWAT team leader from most of my career. From early on, and so highly trained. I'm a graduate of numerous SWAT schools. The Army. I was in the Air Force, but I graduated the Army SWAT school, the Army Sniper School. A lot of that. So I've had a lot of introduction into some operational training, and I see operational training all over the smiley face killer crimes. These are people operating in small cells in many different cities. They operate in 5 to 10 people per cell, probably is for my estimates. But what you would need to have to accomplish these activities, and they operate in kind of a gang aspect as well, whereas you have like an initiation into the gang, and that way people are always wondering why people claim no one keeps a secret, and you can't keep a secret, and someone would rat on these people. Nah, not if you're getting initiated into the gang and they take pictures of your family. Like, let's look at Son of Sam. That's what David Berkowitz's story was, right? He had to give up pictures of his family. He had to kill somebody to get into the gang. These are the same type of activities I think that are playing out again here with the smiley face killers. But in regards to theosophy, you're right. Nazism comes from theosophy. Thelema comes from theosophy. Heavy influence from theosophy.
Yeah,
and,
I wouldn't say it comes from.
Yeah, not necessarily comes, but has a heavy, strong influence. Yeah, strong
I
influence.
think they both understood each other for sure, and like I've said this multiple times, even Crowley had high things to say about Blavatsky himself. So
Yeah,
and
but it's not
normally
just
he shit on women. So not he was who he was. He
Sure.
was very nice about her though.
Blavatsky's oftentimes is like the individual reference as kind of the leader of Theosophy, but relative to this country, it was really a man by the name of Abner Doubleday, the man who allegedly invented baseball.
Oh,
Real
quick,
he was the head of the Theosophical Society after Blavatsky. Oh, good.
Also, if you think about Theosophy, some people do get the whole alien UFO shit from that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, didn't the Nazis also thought they had some Nazi bell or some UFO supposed? There's stories of that as well. Like there's a fucking common thread that goes along with all three of these things.
Sure. No,
UFOs,
I think a large part,
Nazis, and occultism.
I agree. I kind of group them into what I call ancient alien cargo cults. You're familiar with the concept of a cargo cult from like the South Pacific during World War II. The U.S. was dropping cargo on random islands, and the indigenous people of those islands who didn't know airplanes, didn't know who G.I. Joe was, were getting these crates of food and supplies. So they built a whole religion around it, right? So they started building like wooden airplanes to depict what they saw fly overhead. That dropped the cargo, and they thought if they did these ceremonies, that God, that airplane, G.I. Joe, if you will, is what some of the islanders called him, would come back. And these people have been playing out these rituals for many years since then.
Wow.
So
I've seen
regard,
police.
a lot of these, all these occult organizations kind of go into a pyramidal kind of organization in general, I think, but they all are kind of an ancient alien cargo cult organization.
Even another reason, the whole reason I was even bringing up again, like the Nazis and the Nazi bell and like UFOs and Theosophy, is because I did also mean to throw in even that symbol that Kanye got kicked off of Twitter for. That symbol, even though it had the Nazi swastika on it, goes back to a UFO cult. Realism. I did
not know that.
Or realism. However did you say that? Yeah,
that's
a fucking. So you have so you have a fucking UFO cult that believes in UFOs using that same fucking symbol. It's fucking magic and occultism.
Yeah, again, I think I don't know precisely what the infatuation is, but all of these kind of thelemic offshoot organizations seem to have an infatuation with the Nazi vrills or the SS, occult philosophies of those groups, to where I don't think that's something that may still play out here in the Smiley Face Killer cult. They, in my mind, they are a thelemic offshoot. When I say thelemic offshoot, I mean like you had thelema, then what seems to be the going trend within occult organizations is you start your own occult organization. You take different parts and pieces from other occult organizations, you mash them together, and you have a new organization. Be it Temple of Set, offshoot from Church of Satan, which was supposedly an offshoot of thelema, right? Or at least heavily influenced by it, right? So I think if you follow kind of that evolution down, you're going to find the Smiley Face Killer cult in that network, in my opinion, right? And again, you point out a good point, Nick. That does start in large part. A lot of the occult philosophies did begin with the Theosophical Society. And back to Abner Doubleday, the man who allegedly invented baseball, he was a member of the Society of Cincinnati, the secret society that started this nation. They built this nation on top of mounds. What's the game of baseball focused around? A mound. And it's got the compass and square as well, symbology built into the field, if you will. Yep. So
even the mound. I mean, I know this could be a stretch, but I mean, even if you think of what symbol the Nazis use, that looks like it's spinning. So is a mound. In the sense it's spinning. I mean, there's something up with that move. Yeah, there's something up with
I never thought of that, but now that you bring that up, you remember Trent Reznor's album Downward Spiral.
Oh, I use that all the time, actually. As see, that's actually how I try to explain magic. Us coming into the flesh is a downward spiral, man, back up that spiral.
Okay, well, so that definitely has some occult undertones to it, then.
Oh yeah, I mean, not to it's coming out next week anyway, and I think we bring it up in that episode. But I think I might have made a joke because you get a lot of people who are always saying like, oh, if you see that spiraling symbol, that automatically automatically means appear. You know what I'm saying? Or that has something to do with that. And unfortunately, we have those in our eyeball lenses. So I guess we are all of that, aren't we? Again,
That's interesting.
there's
No,
reasons why that symbol's used besides that stuff. I would assume, especially if you want to think of occultism, ocular, spirals, it may mean something besides kid shit. But it's a very deep symbol.
Good point. And there are certainly colors that use that.
Spirals, you even have the spirals in your eyes. So
well, you have the Yonkers cult, the cult. What do they call themselves? The occultists or culture? I'd have to get back and look. They were optometrists that had kind of a cult society.
Yeah.
Yeah, my boy, the Headless Giant. Shout out to the Headless Giant. He had told me about that. I looked it up. I have the link saved. I still haven't fucking looked at what he.
Yeah, I kind of
sent me, but yeah, he told me that.
I kind of took note of it when I was looking at secret societies, kind of just going over my geographical locations. Like I'm originally from Fairfield County, Connecticut, and they're in Ridgefield, and we left there when I was a child, but I don't sound like I'm from there. I was raised by a woman from West Virginia too, so. If you wonder why, you don't sound like you're from Connecticut. Well, yeah. I mean, I lived there for, I think I left there when I was 6. So, but we lived halfway in between the Process Church headquarters and another occult that was in Pound Ridge, New York. So we lived on the border, and there was, as I'm looking back in the past to see where these locations are relative to my history. So you have the Pound Ridge, 2 miles away, you had my house, and then 2 miles past that into Ridgefield, you had another occult group. So we kind of, I've been kind of surrounded by these occult groups my entire life, it seems.
You know what I want to ask you? I want to ask you both, just on this topic of occultism within smiley face killers. I guess all three of us do believe that could be an influence of why it's being done. Do you guys think that, like, could it be the person's like dead on purpose, or could it be like magic gone wrong? Like, could it be a mixture of both? You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I know this sounds silly, but like if you think about Inception, you know how like those people were kind of putting themselves into deeper states of dream, and like at one point, one way to wake them up was the person into a tub.
Yeah.
Whitney Houston died in a tub. I mean, and that's had some weird things around it about like sitting in there for hours before anything was ever done, So who knows? But like what I'm getting at is like I do wonder sometimes, like, are these like magic gone wrong, or was it an actual sacrifice?
I don't think anything's mutually exclusive when you're talking to smiley face killers. I think you have different cells that stalk and hunt and kill the victims differently. I think there's different purposes behind those killings. For example, there could be some or intentional ritual murder. Some of them are, an initiation into the gang gone wrong. Like, for example, there's a case out of Philadelphia from 2008, Tommy Booth, covered in the Drowning Forensics textbook, covered in the Oxygen Smiley Face series with Detective Gannon and Gilbertson. Now, this kid told his uncle, who was an Army colonel, said, "Hey, I'm in trouble. These people want to initiate me into their like criminal activities, and they're involved in drug running, gun running, sex trafficking kind of activities." So I don't think anything's mutually exclusive. Like, you have these different cells kind of operating within certain parameters, but ultimately speaking, gangs fund themselves through illicit trafficking crimes.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you're going to find anything different with the smiley face killers in that respect.
Yeah.
I have just.
I think you're right. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, because
I do think that it's a syndicate for sure. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, but it just like even with the water stuff, the symbolism with that, I could see how like if you knock somebody off and toss them in the water, it's like, I sent them to the abyss. If, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, you took magic to probably to extremes, or as far as you could take it, you're not going to come back, and you're going to be a lifeless dead body here. You just went somewhere else. So you could just take that, like, he's crossed over, and we'll throw him in the water as a symbolism of him going off to the abyss now and going somewhere else.
Right,
I'm sure it may not. Oh, so so that's what I'm getting.
You go back to the ancient Greeks, isn't that part of the whole sort of their whole philosophy and theology into death.
Yeah. I mean, I've even wondered, like, thought that, like, with how even sometimes when they supposedly send them out in water on fire, I think that is probably like
I think you're onto something. There is definitely some sort of occult understanding of water, and I think Drew touched some of it with the abyss. I think there's probably some more greater implications surrounding that concept. But the mound builders, back to kind of where I find this to be, the smiley face killers to be ritual murder. They overwhelmingly occur. I'm not going to say exclusively, but I will say, 90 to my understanding, 99.9%, occur in and around mound sites. The ancient sites of these mounds, some of them still exist. Structures still exist. Some of them have been destroyed in years past. But what was important to the mound builders, what we do know about the mound builders, the folks who built these structures, these earthen structures, is that they built them at the confluence of waterways. That was a very important. Not waterways in general were important. So they're not building these mounds very, very frequently, especially the older, the Edina mounds, what they call them, the oldest mounds, the Edina culture. They're the burial mounds in large part, or the Edina culture. And these are built along riverways, lakes, oceans, but more specifically at the confluence. So where two different waterways meet. These were, so whatever was important to the mound builders relative to the water, it had something to do with why they built these mounds there.
You were the first person. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to make an occult joke about the eyeball. You go, and then I have a question for you, actually, Lisa. So go ahead and say what you got.
You were the first one to associate Native American historical landmarks with the smiley face. And the reason I say that is because I've listened. Well, yes, partly. The reason I say that is because in most of the stuff that I've read, it's always, this or that or whatnot. And a weird occurrence that happened is that one of the times that I was down the trail, I ran into an individual, and going down to the trail often, you kind of recognize the same people. And this person was an older gentleman, and he started an offshoot conversation, started talking about Native American tribes, how they used to convene in this certain area and that they would make decisions and whatever. And I was like, oh, wow, this is such an odd conversation. How it came out of nowhere. Came home, looked it up, jotted down a couple of times, and then seen where some of the, where the bodies were being left. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I remember a massacre had happened here, but they're probably not related. And then I heard your podcast and I was like, okay, I have these two pieces of information. I've never even placed them together. And I said, what are the chances? And so when I went back in and I looked, I was like, wow, yeah, there's a lot of connections here. There's a very, bloody history along the lake there, as well as some of the creeks that exist there. And so when I started to kind of look at the map and see where these creeks are, where the actual lake is, and then looking at religious centers, how they're concentrated in that area as well. Sure. And so it started to kind of just these pieces of the puzzle just started to kind of lay on top of each other. So,
yeah, they kind of coalesce together once you start seeing all the details in the site picture. Yeah. Austin is a mound town. It was built, upon mounds intentionally. Yeah. So the state building, for example, that's a mound site. Lady Bird Lake is a reservoir that was built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. One of 11. So in Texas.
Mm-hmm. So Colorado, it's an 800-mile river, and there was 11 reservoirs that were built on that 800-mile river.
Yeah, and it was kind of more of a 30 or 40 year project by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For example, about 5 miles down the road from my house here, I'm on the east side of Cincinnati in Claremont County. And we just happen to be the #1 drug overdose death capital of America per capita, which I think that ties into the mounds, because I have a general theory that weird shit happens in and around mounds, and just dark energies, if you will. Yeah. But just down the road from me here is a lake called East Fork Lake, and there's an infamous mound that was buried at the bottom of that lake by the Army Corps of Engineers in the 1960s, and it's called the Hanukkah Mound. It's literally shaped like a menorah. And the reason why we know this mound existed is because back to that initial secret society that built America, the Society of Cincinnati, started by George Washington and his officers of the Revolutionary Army. They all drew maps and surveys. They were all very skilled in mathematics. Essentially, George Washington had equate to a PhD in mathematics by the age of 16. So these men all drew very detailed surveys and maps, and they did all their intent. Seemingly their primary intent was to go draw all these mounds. And they drew this mound 4 or 5 times before in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And then it was officially buried in 1960s, along with a lot of other mounds: Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas. All these U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects, what they were doing, I don't know. I can't, necessarily attribute nefarious, attributes to their activities, but what the product of their activities was they were flooding towns that sat in valleys, and the towns that sat in valleys all seemingly had some very important mound locations in them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, I don't know if someone at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers said, you know what, let's bury this history or bury these mounds. I tend to lean towards that. That's probably was at least part of their intention. But yeah, so the way I got onto the whole Smiley Face Killer kind of mound connection was, much like your story there, Lisa, was kind of a roundabout way, just kind of seeing different details at different times, and then eventually kind of coalescing into one, cogent sight picture. And that was, let me take it back just one step and how I got interested in Smiley Face Killers in general. It's 2008. I was stationed in San Antonio at Randolph Air Force Base, working for the military police headquarters unit there. And I had escaped my hole for the afternoon. I was locked in. I had an office, secure office down in the basement. And I didn't ever like to go upstairs much. But when I did, I never stayed too long. I was in and out, too much politics going on up there for me. But there was a TV on in our lobby of our office, and it was Fox News, and it was Detective Gannon and Professor Gilbert, and they were talking Smiley Face Killers with it's either Glenn Beck or Geraldo. I don't remember now. I'm not big into Fox News, but it was one of those characters. And they were describing all, the whole kind of the victimology. It's never overweight, never underweight, athletic, 3.5 GPAs or higher. Kind of the best of the best, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, it was just white men for the most part, Caucasian.
Right.
It's kind of different ethnic groups have been encompassed in the victimology since then, but at that time it was Caucasians. So I remember looking at the TV, and I'm like, wait a second. I meet all these qualifications. I was like, I got to learn more about this, because I'd actually, by that point in time, I'd already been drugged in a bar before in South Korea back in 2002. So I was aware of that aspect of, men do get drugged in bars. It does happen. So this is 2008, and I'm like, well, I go to bars about every night, so I better pay attention to what these people are talking about. And that was where my interest began. Years later, during my grad school education, I did some projects using the Case Studies in Drowning Forensics book as in my research projects. So I kind of got more interested there. And at that time I was traveling around the US a lot. And when I had free time, different cities across the US, I've been to like every Air Force base and that kind of thing, just doing, military police duties from a higher headquarters level support type duties. And, I'd go and do my business in the base that day. And in the evenings, I'd either go sit in my hotel room. By that point in time, I'd all but stopped going to bars every night and quit drinking. So I started going to mound sites and locations in these cities, and I started going to Smiley Face Killer victim sites, because these are two subjects that were my hobbies. And I suddenly found myself at the same locations. When I'm visiting a Smiley Face Killer site, when I'm looking it up in that town, I'm also, where's the mounds at in this town, and then where's the Smiley Face Killer victims at in this town, and it turns out they were the same spots. So that's
putting in Google Maps. It's like 500 feet away. You're like, fuck.
Like, I'm already here. So that was kind of one of the first things that really kind of bridged the gap in my mind. But when I went back and looked at the details of the case, something I had overlooked in the initial assessment by Gannon and Gilbertson, they had found the word Sensenawal in graffiti inscribed on a wall near Smiley Face and a victim in Lansing, Michigan. This was like 2004 is when that victim occurred. Fast forward to 2000 and we'll call it 6, I think. Matt Krasicki was a high school varsity wrestler out of Heartland, Wisconsin, just north of Milwaukee. Arrowhead High School, I believe. So you can see the kind of the Indian terminology already being used there. So if you look Arrowhead High School up on a map, you'll see it's surrounded by mounds. So a lot of these victims I started discovering were coming from these mounds, right? Like mound areas. When in the case of Krasicki, that's kind of tipped me off. So not only he's later found at a mound, right? Deceased, hundreds of miles from his home, I'll get into that in a minute here. But that also bridged the gap in my mind that some of these victims are coming from cities that are mound cities as well. I don't know if it means anything, but it's
Oh,
certainly a
yeah.
greater connection.
No.
That's what.
Which is interesting. That's interesting because most of the victims are not living in Austin or not from Austin.
And if that's the case in a lot of the victims, they're not from that city. Yeah.
Yeah, which is very odd.
That applies across the board.
That's what I like. Think about that. Somebody who's not normally from there getting
Yep.
fucked. Taken from somebody who's not normally from there. I mean, that's like how serial killers get away for so long until they get caught.
That's why I think they're being stalked. I genuinely believe they're being stalked. I mean, everything leads to the conclusion that either they are already being tracked or they're being stalked or they have had a previous encounter of some sort prior to that one encounter.
I think you're spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I will say this, I don't know if this is a correlation, but there is a software company that recently set up shop here in Austin. And I basically, they started in 1977 and their first client was the CIA. And they are a software company that basically collects data on all people in real time and I guess just track it. So to me, and they're located right across the street from where 2 bodies were found.
Interesting. Yeah, the CIA has quite a footprint in Austin. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
That's an interesting thought because there are some just totally different. Well, maybe not totally different, but slightly different subject: homicide and occultism, at least. The Idaho 4 murders out of Moscow, Idaho. I recently I've done a couple podcasts on the Farm podcast with host recluse Stephen Snyder, and one of the things that I discovered there was a software company out of Austin who processed the DNA evidence, and they have some interesting connections as well.
Yeah.
Relative, and that's the DNA evidence they're using to convict this alleged homicidal maniac and Brian Coburn, who I don't think.
And that was, and that was another thing. There's so many investigations into medical examiners that are nefarious as well. I mean, the one that was here in Travis County is under investigation, currently under a lawsuit for falsifying autopsies, changing his conclusions, I believe changing his testimony, as well as I believe there's one case where there were organs harvested and sold. Wow.
Those are some serious allegations.
Yeah. Now, are they true? I don't know, but that's what the investigations are showing.
No, I mean, it definitely, overall, the pattern that continues to repeat itself through definitely these, I think, occult crimes in general, but smiley face killer victim crimes, murders, is the medical examiner's offices not doing their jobs. And that is a sort of a sliding scale.
Yeah. Most of the victims don't have a complete autopsy. Most of them are just kind of done. I believe in some of the forums, they're indicating that families are being bullied to cremate the loved ones. And so there's so many things that holes in the entire theory of it all.
Yeah, and it gets very political in these instances. And back to some of the politics, what I'm referring to is how political the investigations get with the smiley face killer victims. Matt Krasicki from just north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So he dies in east of Boyk, Iowa, on the Iowa-Illinois border there. His body's recovered off of Sinsinawa Street, which was the same name as the previous Indian name found in Lansing, Michigan.
Right.
Sinsinawa Street is named Sinsinawa Street because it sits at the confluence of Sinsinawa River and the Mississippi River. So where those two rivers meet, it's a tributary into the Mississippi River. If you follow Sinsinawa River up about 30 miles, you'll find Sinsinawa Mound. Rattlesnake Mound. Is what that translates into. And there's not been any excavations, or archaeological, anthropological, ethnological excavations or studies into that mound in Wisconsin. However, if you were to try to find another Sinsinawa mound for relative comparison, you can go to East St. Louis, Illinois. The Cahokia Mound structures. It's the largest mound complex still remaining in America. It was a very important complex to the religious order behind that started the Knights Templar, the Cistercian monks, for example.
Oh, wow.
Cistercian monks lived on top of the biggest mound there. It's the size, square footage wise, it's the size of the Great Pyramid. It's a pyramidal structure, but it's flat on top. It's called Monk's Mound because the Cistercian monks back in like the early 1600s were living on top of it. So,
Wow.
and that, again, those are the folks directly connected to the Knights Templar, the Templar descendants of the Society of Cincinnati, Society of Cincinnati's who built America on the mounds. So you can see kind of this evolution of mound, they have some sort of veneration to these mounds over the years. But Cahokia has a mound, Cincinnati mound. It's been excavated. They've done numerous studies on it, anthropological, archaeological. And what they determined was that all of the bodies they found in that mound were ritual human sacrifices.
Oh, wow.
And initially, some of the early studies they determined, the scientist folks determined that those ritual human sacrifices were of foreigners, right? Folks from not within their community that were, maybe passing through and kidnapped and murdered or whatever. No, they were now the leading theory is they were the best and the brightest men of that community, which is in line with ancient human sacrificial philosophies that you can find even in the Bible.
Correct.
The best and the brightest.
Yeah.
They were set up for
sacrifice of your firstborn. Firstborn was always,
So that's kind of what I view the Smiley Face Killer murders are, is this modern day human sacrifice. And again, they're happening at the same locations as the ancient human sacrifices that we have documented here in America at some of these mound sites. Right. With Gristle, you have the Cincinnati, which again, so after I realized that I was visiting both mound and Smiley Face Killer sites where they were same locations across America, that's when I went back and looked. And I saw the Cincinnati pieces, and I got deeper into that aspect of it to try to figure out if there is actual connections, or are they just more of a correlation versus causation type argument. Was it are these people being killed there because of these mounds, or just coincidence and happens to be the same location? And I kind of that's when I determined no, this is far beyond sheer coincidence. And again, with Krasicki, there's even more details there besides just the human sacrifice portion there in the Cincinnati portion. His father, speaking to the politics of the matter, his father was a U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Wisconsin. So you have the marshals are set up in every state, kind of broken into two different divisions and two different regions of the state. Mm-hmm. His father was the U.S. Marshal there for that state. Before that, he was the county sheriff for the county where Krasicki grew up in and came from. So, and I believe his stepmother was a DEA agent. So as far as the politics go, you'd figure a family like that should be able to kick the can down the road as far as an investigation goes into the murder of the child. Didn't happen. Yeah. Didn't happen.
No. Because it goes further up.
Oh, that's one. Yeah, definitely. To speaking to the occult nature of politics in this country, I think as well is what it speaks to. For example, back to the DC restaurant establishment we referenced before. One of the individuals that used to hang out there quite frequently was John Podesta. Now, one of the most interesting details I found out of the John Podesta emails was somebody wrote John Podesta an email, and I can't remember who wrote the email right now. Come back to me eventually, maybe. But the email said, "I need a thelemic favor." That thelemic favor was asking for a one-on-one meeting with Barack Obama, because Podesta was Obama's senior advisor. And there's only one reason you're going to use a phrase like that, and it has no context unless the person you're writing to understands what that means. It has a context for that terminology. So there seems to be some high-ranking politics and thelemic activities that bridge somewhere in and around John Podesta, in my opinion. Yeah. And I've actually written a whole series on that, which I intend to turn into a podcast here soon, since I no longer have those writings available on the internet. And,
you could probably do an amazing series on that.
Well, it's some good stuff. I'll send it to you. You can read it. At least I'll send you the intro of the first chapter. I think it's a 3-part series. I actually tried to get it published in the National Enquirer a couple of years ago, and I was this close to getting it done, and then it got canned at the last minute, and I was blacklisted from I had a business partner. I was working with a guy out of Chicago, big publisher guy. He's an economic guy, but he used to write an economics column. Had 50 million daily readers, not circulation, but daily readers. Big guy in the economics world. But I just needed his publishing, connections. So we tried, failed. But that's why I'm saying, like, in my mind, there is a deep connection between the high level of politics and high level of occultism in this country. So when you have cases like Matt Krasicki, who you'd think his family would be able to properly stoke an investigation of their son's death, it didn't happen. 18. Now, here's where I find an epicenter of this activity in and around Wisconsin and Minnesota. Is my opinion is the greatest volume of cases. And Matt Krasicki is a great example. 18 months after Matt Krzyzewski died, Jared Dion died, SFK victim in La Crosse, Wisconsin. They were on the same high school varsity wrestling team. This is
That's right. I
years
know where
after
you're going
high
with
school.
this.
You know, actually, I think now that I take that back. Jared Dion died in 2004, and 18 months later was Matt Krzyzewski. So Krzyzewski's a number of years separated from high school. Like there's for these two victims, 18 months apart, 300 or so miles apart, not in their hometowns, right, away from their hometown. Which again, I think is I stress that because I think it's a common thread in all these the victimologies that are not from that town.
Sure. Yeah, it's a key factor.
There's very few that are from that town that they're victimized in and murdered in. But yeah, so I think that's grounds for great. It's always been nothing I've ever done, but seemingly grounds for greater scrutiny and investigation into kind of where this phenomenon began, how these cults operate, or maybe even the initial onset of the activity, as far as the organized activity aspects of it, right? Because how would it get from New York, right, in '97, right, to Wisconsin in 2004? And then Iowa in 2006 involve victims that were on the same high school varsity wrestling team. It's just beyond coincidence, in my opinion. But, no one really, these are the things that don't really seem to get any kind of greater scrutiny from any law enforcement authorities, and certainly not the FBI. Because relative to Jared Dion, the FBI reviewed his case. So he was one of the initial 6 or 7 cases that occurred there in La Crosse that the FBI reviewed those cases, right, and said nothing to see here, right?
Right.
But what their review consisted of this: they had received copies of the death investigation reports from La Crosse PD, right, to the FBI psychological behavioral analysis folks in DC, and all they did was look at the reports and say, well, yeah, these are drownings. The report says it's a drowning. The words on the report say it's a drowning. It's a drowning.
And that's it. It was a closed case. Nothing further. Yeah.
So that's what I like to call debunking the debunkers within the smiley face killer, a phenomenon, because everyone likes to reference, I fact checked you. The FBI says that's not a real thing. I'm like, yeah, the FBI's investigation wasn't a real thing.
Yeah.
It's something I wanted to.
Go ahead.
I'm not trying to interrupt, but
go ahead.
just because of the time. I'll probably go in about another 20 or 30 minutes. It's an Occult Reject show, so it's kind of normally longer, so I don't mind going longer. But I do want to try to get into. I do know that there was certain topics that Vance, I know that you had said doesn't seem to be talked about or too big. I know we talked about some of them now, like the mounds and even this, that don't seem to get enough light on it. And I know Lisa had said that herself, and she even said that she thought you touched upon some things that need to be talked about more. Is there another example that both of you would really like to really, here's the time to talk about that topic more?
I have one I'll hold for last. I'll let Lisa bring up.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, so I think a lot of the feedback I get relative to my mound theory regarding the smiley face killer victims and the murders is that, well, if every city's built on mounds, then how do you know that this is a mound related activity? And I have 2 answers to that. One is what I call my Albuquerque hypothesis. So I took La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I found a geographically separated but demographically similar kind of city as far as the college students go, as far as the bars go, as far as the river through town goes, right? Similar environment, but I wanted a city that had more people than La Crosse, whereas La Crosse has 12 victims since 1998, I think, and 12 murders, murdered victims there. So looking at a city like Albuquerque, New Mexico, right, has no mounds, right? Has 3 times the population, I think, of total population, maybe 5 times the population of college students, 0 victims. So, and they have a river that runs right through town, no different than La Crosse would, geographically speaking, relative to the universities. And so, if this is not some sort of human sacrifice that's being conducted in modern day, being conducted at ancient human sacrificial sites, these mounds, then what is it? Because places like Albuquerque, New Mexico should have 36 victims.
So many, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. See, this even goes
Cross has
back
12.
I hate to use even the word occultism, but like I wonder if there's like something to do with literally that structure and running water, some sort of energy, some sort of portal, something like that. I mean, even like I don't want to go into it too much, but like even like joking around about the eyeball and stuff. Like I was saying something to Lisa earlier where the things that we're covering with like the lens and the zonules, and I said, joking around, like drawbridges and moats and like walking the plank, or even like in Golden Child when Eddie Murphy's got to walk on those.
I love that movie. It's a great movie.
That all could be like ways of showing that you have these things that look like sticks. The zonules like attached to your lens, and that determines, I guess, according, I'm sure Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong, that has something to do with raising the lens as well. Now, in my opinion, this is just, this has something to do with magic, and I do think when that shit happens inside of there, death, in a sense, is actually part of magic. And when that shit and that change starts happening in your eyes and back into your brain, I do think there is death involved. So this whole spiel that I'm getting at is that spiraled mound, which could be your spiraling pupil closing, and then the water around it could literally be like the aqueous humor that is around your lens. Like there's stories of like the river of Styx, in my opinion, you going across that river that has the zonules in and making it to your lens, which reflects like the lamp the hermit holds, who's also holding a, So like I could see there's something up with these spirals in that water, multiple occult angles to match death being there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think you're definitely onto something. There seems to be some sort of correlation there, in the whole as above, kind of so below context of the occultism, where things replicate themselves in various formats and forms.
I think if you were to really analyze the bodies being left and do a thorough investigation, or even get your hands on the actual things that are being said or not being placed in public, you could literally see way more occult stuff than we're seeing right now on the surface, for sure. I think the water element is a two birds, one stone thing. Water being very strong in the occult, but also washing clean the evidence, leaving no trace. And so it's a double whammy, and absolutely the water's being used. The fact that these men are highly skilled, they're fit, educated, young, I mean, speaks to so many things. It could go back to, like you mentioned, the firstborn sacrifice, human sacrifice. You always sacrifice the best. You never sacrifice the worst, especially to the gods, right? You always gave the gods the best of the best. But also it almost brought about, tissue and organ harvesting in my head, because who would you gather if you were to gather tissue and organs from? It would be somebody that was highly educated, fit, and young. I mean, if you want to go into the whole tissue organ harvesting, just check out how much it is on the black market. I mean, and again, I don't know what the autopsy says, specifically. I only know what is being placed out for me to view. So yeah, and then is our organs associated with the occult being removed or damaged? We don't know.
No, you bring up some good points, Lisa, and I think there is definitely some more, lack of a better term, occulted activities of organ harvesting that does go on in this country even today. I mean, just on its face, from the organs sold from Planned Parenthood to China, there's, that's been fairly well documented by this point.
I mean, just alone with going back to the eye, just alone talking about how many people are on the wait list for eye transplants, corneal transplants, and how much it costs just for that.
Yeah, you certainly can't rule it out. So, certainly can't rule it out. That is a good thought. That's interesting. Interesting.
But that's just.
So, anyway, you mentioned it again, Lisa, and he mentioned earlier, and I thought about something. I was like, no, I'm going to bring it up now since you mentioned it again. I mean, this could be a high stretch, and I'm not discrediting the parents of any of these victims, like grieving. It really happened. Not discrediting that, but if there was an occult aspect, let's say maybe a tenth of these things, I mean, in the way that I'm thinking, you never know. This could be possible. You again talking about sacrificing your child. Well, if you know your child is going somewhere far and not normally around in its area, you could let somebody else know that, and they could go do what they need to do, and it never was around you at all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to start taking in a child sacrifice at that point, I mean, who knows?
It's certainly possible. I mean, again, I don't think it's a 100% rule, or that. But
I'm just spitballing an idea.
Yeah. No, I think in some cases that could very well be prevalent. Yeah.
In terms of sacrificing, I will say that it's odd to me that some of these cities have a very high homeless population, and it was always my belief. This is a tangent, but bear with me. It was always my belief that the reason the homeless population was allowed to increase was because it was a way to have human clinical trials under the radar. That was always my conspiracy belief. And that if it goes aligned with testing things such as software, such as products, such as organ harvesting, now switching from a homeless population to now a prominent demographic. That's kind of where I was going with all that. But in terms of the sacrifice, I mean, I had never thought of that before, but that's a very interesting angle.
I would leave it open that both of those things could be going on.
I don't think we should. Definitely turnover.
Austin's got a lot of homeless population. Very high homeless population. And as far as the intelligence agencies, they love tormenting the homeless over the years. There's a long history of intelligence operations being perpetrated against the edges of society, if you will, and that being drug addicts and homeless and et cetera.
Right.
So that's certainly something that does play out. Mm-hmm. But I mean, overall, this is a nationwide, criminal syndicate, nationwide cult, whatever you want, whatever terminology you want to apply to it. There is occult aspects to it, but there's criminal gang aspects to it. So it's kind of a hybrid.
Absolutely.
That's what I think.
And we're only concentrating on the men that are found in the river. We're not concentrating on the men that are found dead, killed, stabbed, shot, whatever. No. It could be that somebody in the cult, let's just say in that cult, leaked information or accidentally sent a picture to the wrong person, and all of a sudden they're dead on the street in the barrios of wherever. And you don't associate the two at all.
Absolutely.
Except if you were looking for it.
So, and if someone, and in that scenario, if someone's found dead on the street, shot or stabbed, that's a gang crime or some sort of criminal organization crime, and no chance in hell the law enforcement is going to try to connect the two. They're just going to write off as another dead scumbag. I mean,
why would you, right? Why would you, unless you're looking for it? Yeah.
That's a good point. And if you go from Boston, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, New York City, Hoboken, Union City, New Jersey City. I mean, all over that area. I've documented a lot of the victims in those regions and the mounds related to the sites and stuff. It's once you put it on a map, it's pretty apparent. You start putting points on a map, seeing where the victim was last seen, seeing where the victim's body's found, seeing where the ancient mound structures either currently still sit because they've been there for thousands of years, or they've been destroyed in years past. But we have maps showing where they were formerly located. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Ohio, Cincinnati's a real hotbed, and across southern Ohio, Michigan, Illinois right now is like Austin, Chicago, and kind of mid-central Illinois, very heavy SFK victim activity right now. A lot of victims in those regions. Whereas, Wisconsin and Minnesota, very much still active. Iowa, those are all very, very active spots still. Seemingly right now, a lot of the concentrations in around Chicago and around Austin and around Houston. Georgia's a very common place. I know, speaking of William Ramsey's Smiley Face Killer documentaries and some of his researcher that he works with in those, a fellow by the name of Jim Smith. Jim Smith and I have had numerous conversations offline in regards to the mound. I had him send me a list of victims. Send me a list of 10 victims in your area in Georgia that you think are good victim, fit the victimology of the Smiley Face Killer victims. And most of, I think 5 or 6 of the list he sent me, maybe, or a couple of them. The majority of the list he sent me was from an area called Lake Lanier, Georgia. and you can just go on the Wikipedia page of Lake Lanier and see the history of the mounds. That was
Wow.
Lake Lanier, and much like Ladybird Lake Reservoir in Alston, Lake Lanier was built by the Army, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers,
Okay.
flooding riverways and building a dam and flooding a town. And in that town, there's huge mound complexes, and Lake Lanier is an interesting spot as far as dark energy goes as well, because on and above the Smiley Face Killer victims, which they have a long list from that lake in northern Georgia, they have like 200 deaths over like the last few decades there. It's pretty extreme. And these aren't deaths.
Yeah.
In large part, they're not water recreation activities, right? Like the Smiley Face Killer. They're not kids. They're not young men that are out doing boating or swimming or recreational activities in the warm months. It's all non-recreational, nowhere near the water, and in the cold months. And again, not just rivers.
That's another one. They're only in the cold months. Yeah.
Yeah, only in the cold months. And there's a lot of victims that have turned up in golf course retaining ponds. Water obstacles on golf courses. Now, the thing to know about golf courses is there's not a golf course in the Midwest that's not built around mounds, because when you're building a golf course, you want some sort of natural topography to, obstacles and stuff. And if you already have mounds there, you build around the mounds. And I can point out dozens of golf courses that meet that criteria.
That's why Trump's got gold.
You never know. I tend to attribute to a Scottish heritage. We never know.
Yeah. Yo, that's really weird with the mounds. You're making me think of. I don't think it's who knows. I don't think it's a Smiley Face Killer thing, but even growing up out in like Long Island, they have Ronkonkoma out there, Lake Ronkonkoma, which I wasn't too far away from, and for a while, every year for the longest time, always someone would drown every summer, and like they even have this Indian tale about it. I think the princess of the lake, and so she takes a man every year because she couldn't fucking marry the dude she wanted to be with, or some shit like that.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, so and I'll be
Smithtown, Comac.
Yeah, it's in Lake Ronkonkoma. Yeah, Smithtown would be like right next door.
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time out there. I got a friend lives there.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, damn, I gotta talk to you after this.
So I've heard that story. Yeah, there's a lot of mound. What's the
and it's
Brookhaven Labs? Is it right there in Smithtown? That's built on mounds.
Yeah, that's too far away. Yeah, that is true. So. I mean, even Tesla wanted to fucking put his thing out here too on Long Island. Very weird, but like I'm now wondering. I'm like, is there mounds anywhere around this lake? I should be wondering about.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, that Long Island's got a lot of mound activity throughout there. A lot of them were the shell mounds. They called them the midden mounds. So what happened with the mound builders? They built with whatever earthen materials they had available to them. A lot of times, historians call them seashell junk piles, but they're called midden mounds. MID.
And thinking about it now, and again, I'm not says anything to Smiley Face Killers, but like I did thinking, I did. Unfortunately, I went to school with a kid who ended up one of the people that drowned in that lake. But then I was thinking, but he was in the April posse though. So like it was again.
I actually know a Smiley Face Killer victim. He died in 20. Well, his body's never been recovered, but he fits the victimology of a Smiley Face Killer victim. Kid that briefly worked for me in a pre-deployment training in Iraq in 2011. He disappeared out of Hermosa Beach, California. Michael Van Zant. Didn't know the kid that great. I was only in training with him for about 6 weeks. He went to a different base in Iraq than I did, but he was my radio controller on my flight. I was the flight chief for security operations. So I had 40, 50 troops. He was my radio operator in the security control center for a number of weeks there in our training. Sharp kid, squared away. I mean, as far as some kid who's just going to leave his family and his kids and go disappear and run off, it's not never the type of character I would have presumed that guy to be. Again, I didn't know him intimately well, just professionally, that is. But it's that's one case that's always kind of troubled me because again, they've never even found that man's body. Speaking to your reference of going to school with a fellow that drowned out in that lake.
That's wild.
Yeah, I just overwhelming. I think, again, back to my point of all these cities are built on mounds, not just the Albuquerque hypothesis piece I discussed before, but another case featured in the Oxygen series about the Smiley Face Killer victims, The Hunt for the Smiley Face Killers, and in the textbook by Gilbert and Gannon, a fellow by the name of Todd Geib. 2005, Casanova, Michigan, so about an hour and 15 minutes north of Lansing, where the Cincinnati graffiti was, where Lansing's got 5 or 6 victims that I can think of off the top of my head since 1996. So a year before Patrick McNeil, they had a Smiley Face Killer victim in Lansing. So that's why I'm fine with calling Patrick McNeil patient or victim 0, but I do leave open the possibility that there are previous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with that.
And speaking to the gang portion with the 8-ball fellas you were just talking about there, Nick, gangs often deal drugs. So there's a gang and a drug dealer associated with the Todd Geib case. So according to Gannon and Gilbertson in their textbook, they've given names to law enforcement. They've given suspect names. They've met with politicians. They've met with the FBI. They've met with the Department of Justice. No one wants these suspect names. You know what I mean? That Gilbert and Gannon produce, Gilbert and Gannon and their team. But relative to the Todd Geib case, the cocaine dealer that had a beef with Todd Geib, who was their number one suspect for Gilbert and Gannon, they don't put the man's name in the book, but they reference the cocaine dealer from Lansing, Michigan. He was present at the field party that Todd Geib disappeared from in his hometown. Small rural hometown, again, 60, 70 miles north of Lansing. So no cities around there, right? So they just happened to find one of the small towns in Michigan that was built on a mound. And Todd was later found, in the pond right there by his house, in the field party that he, in a town he grew up in. And again, the cocaine dealer was present at that party. So, and the forensics behind his death was pretty interesting because it was covered in the Oxygen series show. They did the pig experiment where they had the pig in the water for 3 weeks to see what kind of.
Yes, I remember that.
The water temperatures were a little bit warmer there, so they thought there might be some sort of variations and stuff. It's all covered in great detail in the textbook. The TV show was simply putting the textbook into a television format for 5 of the cases. So you can find more details from 5 of those cases from the TV series in their case studies and drowning forensics textbook, which is like 2013 or 14 that came out. But the pig experiment was pretty. It was a good strong indicator they did the show showing that Todd Geib was not in that water for 21 days.
Right.
And not only on top of that, not only was he clearly not in the water, the owner of that pond was scuba diving in that and went right into the area.
That's right.
Went into the pond right where the same location where they found Todd's body, 2 days after he was scuba diving.
Right.
And Todd was found floating like a bobber, up and down, like almost standing in the water. Right.
So weird.
And that's not how men generally are found.
No, not at all.
Again, no bloating, so he shouldn't have been floating at all.
Yeah.
As you pointed out earlier, Lisa.
Yeah.
And a smiley face graffiti was found right by where his body was found, where a nearby tree. In the year after Todd's death, someone put a smiley face sticker on his gravestone.
On the graveside.
This is 3 years prior to any public comment from Gannon or Gilbertson on the smiley face graffiti.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that clearly indicates there was insider knowledge of whoever did that.
Absolutely.
So and he grew up on a mound complex called the Half Moon Lake Mound Complex.
Weird.
Yeah.
This mound's weird.
Yeah, and as far as the authorities' treatment of that, I think I find the manner in which the authorities treat these families just absolutely abysmal. Just completely abysmal. A good indicator of that is the Dakota James case from 2017. There's out of Pittsburgh. It's featured in the Oxygen show, but not in the book because it happened after the book, but featured in the show. And Dakota James's family just got awful treatment from the prosecutor's office, the police, everybody. The local newspaper was so perturbed by this treatment that they witnessed the family. The crime reporter from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did a podcast on Dakota James's death, and 2 of the other Paul Kochu and another victim, Jimmy Slang, I think was his name. 3 victims all around the same time period, all in Pittsburgh, all meeting the same SFK victimology criteria, all found in water. But he did a very good expose on just how the families were treated in those cases, and Todd Geib is another good indicator of how awful some of these families are treated. They said he ran away with a hooker. The authorities told him that. Then they came back and printed this one in the newspaper. Todd was hit by a car and buried in a shallow grave. And then, then the third week was was when his body was discovered in the pond. So all of those were kind of blown out of the water. But it just shows you that the lack of integrity in these authorities. And then it wasn't Cyril Wecht, but it was a different pathologist, and his name's escaping me at the moment. But this pathologist got involved in the Todd Geib case, took the autopsy, got a second autopsy report that he did, right? That this pathologist did. I think he was out of upstate New York, if I remember correctly, which that's another hotbed. Syracuse, Ithaca, all those areas in upstate New York. Those are all very SFK. Ithaca's terrible. They got at least a dozen in the last 15 years, 20 years. Again,
see, that's like even another thing. Like, not to like interrupt, and I'm not going to go on too long, but like you have stuff like I feel like from as you mentioned straight down to like where the Son of Sam was. You know what I'm saying? I feel you have so much like weird, different occult groups or
the Hudson River Valley,
or cults popping up from like the 70s on, like just up that area.
I'll give you one.
You see those fucking weirdest shit goes on too.
Well, I'll give you an older,
like the weirdest deaths.
Oh. Yeah. The Society of Cincinnati started in the Hudson River Valley, just south of Newburgh, right on the Hudson River, right on the mound. So that whole kind of that whole area of New York, that band of New York there. Yeah, you're right. There's definitely a lot of weird activity. Sleepy Hollow falls in that. Tarrytown, New York falls through there as well.
I mean, Joseph Smith found his fucking Mormon plates in fucking New York, for fuck's sake.
My cousin Joseph Smith found his Mormon plates.
Real quick, we only I'll give about another 10 minutes for 2 hours, and we'll wrap it up there. Lisa, was there anything that I know you had things that you were like saying you thought were really important?
I think one was the software company. That was one thing that I wanted to mention, and then the association with the bloody history of Austin. Just a side tangent was that there is, I believe, a group of people wanting the remains back of their ancestors that the museum, not the museum, but the university here has them and will not release them. That they found them along the river, along the creeks, in those areas where these bodies are being found. But they've collected them and they're in collectors' storage, I guess. And that descendants have requested these remains so that they may bury them somewhere. And they said, well, there's no association. We can't, we don't see any association genetic wise. And so there is all that skirmish going on in the background. Of course, you don't hear about it, but I think at some point there's, it's kind of sad. It's like over 2,000 remains. So it's not just like one or two. And I think they're only requesting like 3, but out of the 2,000. But there's that, the bloody history, the fact that there is this ongoing Native American skirmish with the, I guess, modernized population. I don't know how you would classify that. And then just that you pretty much highlighted everything was that, the months when they're happening, they're not happening in the summer. It's not fitting the pattern of accidental drowning, but yet it is being ruled accidental drowning. And so, that was pretty much the extent of it.
There was another question I did want to ask both of you. These deaths, do a lot of them primarily happen, like, I would say give it between, like, you mentioned Halloween before, so I'll go far back as Halloween. But I'd rather prefer, like, around Christmas or the winter, or like at the end of fall, right before the spring. Do a lot of them happen during that time? I mean, like you said yourself before January, there was a few.
Yeah, I think from what I've kind of noticed, New Year's Eve, Halloween, these are you can find a lot of victims from those 2 dates, and within a day or two of those dates, especially. But yeah, I think a lot of times February seems to be an uptick. February and March, during the in March in Boston, that's still freezing, so, or even New York at times.
I'm getting like,
at least in Austin, it's like the first week for sure, and then midweek, and that's pretty much it. I think there was an outlier of where there was like a body recovered almost every week in December, but that was back in 2018. But yeah, it almost follows a pattern of a paycheck. Like if you're getting a biweekly paycheck, you know what I mean? Or in moon cycles.
Which is prevalent in, I believe it's the Zodiac killings.
Yes. And so I have yet to map out that was going to be my next thing, is to map out the moon cycles on these. But you go into certain news articles and it'll say, oh, they went missing this day, and then somebody else will say, no, they were found that day. And so you have to cross-reference all these articles to make sure that it is that day that they were found, or when they. So I still have yet to confirm all of that.
Yeah,
but
if
then
you do
go
get
into the
into
moon
that,
cycles.
if you do get into that, just from my advice, I will look at the day they disappeared, and I would even keep track of the day that they're and see
That they were.
correlations.
Okay.
Yeah,
found.
even even the astrology of what's going on, or the date, or there's other things that went on.
Yeah,
I would even check.
I think
that,
they purposely want people to find them, like the whole braggadocious thing, and then
they bury them instead of tossing them in water.
Especially the same spot where they left.
Absolutely.
Many victims are found within feet of where they disappeared from.
Yes.
And water currents would take them somewhere else in the river.
And they're found floating with face up.
Right.
I think that was another thing, because usually when you're drowning, accidental drownings, you're face down. I think one of them, I can't remember who, but they were, it wasn't in Austin, but someone was found laying with their arms crossed.
Chris Jenkins.
That's who it was.
Halloween 2002, he disappeared. Yeah. And again, you have another. They finally did classify his case as a homicide, but for years, accidental. He's wearing different shoes. He's still in his Halloween costume when they find him 3 weeks later. He's fallen off a bridge that he clearly would have broken bones. Has no broken bones, even though they said he jumped off the bridge and committed suicide. Mm-hmm. Dogs tracked him from the bar he was thrown out of to a parking garage where they found portions of his Halloween costume down across the bridge in the middle of the roadway. So he clearly didn't walk through the middle lane of traffic down over a bridge. Right. It seems, and this is another case where dogs track the victim's scent, and he's clearly being taken out in a vehicle somehow.
So even your arms crossed like that is Osiris prison used that.
Right. That's what it reminded me of, like an Egyptian.
Death and rebirth. Yeah. I mean, even that again. I mean, I'm not going to go into it again. The whole thing with the eyeball and the sticks and stuff. But even Osiris Risen fits that whole rising and the lens and stuff. Very weird. Very weird.
And in Chris Jenkins' case, his uncle was a regional FBI director, and the family they finally did get it classified as a homicide. It took them a lot of work.
Yeah. That I remember. I remember actually kind of like keeping a track on that. I was like,
I don't remember if it was the same bar, if it was a different bar, but like 3 or 4 months after Chris Jenkins' murder, it was at least on the same road in a little bar area there in Minneapolis. Another victim was nearly kidnapped, and his friend stopped it. It's closing time. So this is how I think a lot of these cases go down. This is one of the witness statements that reported this to Detective Gannon later, was that he was out. This would-be victim was out with his friends at a bar. They all kind of got separated at closing time, getting ready to leave the bar, right? And the 2 or 3 friends are looking for their other buddy, and they can't find him. And next thing they know, they said he was totally fine. He wasn't totally inebriated. He was walking, talking, everything. Next thing they know, they go outside. There's 2 men walking with their inebriated, now super inebriated friend, because he's probably drugged with GHB by that point, as it would later indicate from his behaviors. But they were just walking casually with him down the sidewalk, kind of like holding his arms and elbows, like helping him into a panel van, that was sitting with the door open. And his friends interceded. They ran down there and they started, beating the guys up. They were trying to apparently kidnap their friend, and then those guys jumped in the van and they got their friend out of there safely, and then they reported to Detective Gannon. So I think that's a lot of, if you want to talk about the mode of operations that kind of goes on with how you extract a victim out of those circumstances, I think that's a great indicator right there.
You mentioned this whole bar thing, and this will be like the last question, and we'll wrap it up. Just because I can't remember the exact name, but isn't there a connection between Gacy and another serial killer actually getting a kid from a bar, the same bar? I can't remember.
There's definitely evidence
which
working
one it is.
Gacy was definitely
either like. Sorry.
No, good. No, good.
I can't remember if it's Dahmer or another one, but it's. I mean, first off, Gacy. We covered the Loyal Order of the Moose. He was in that. Guys got 33 flavors. Fucking balloon. He showed people. I definitely think Gacy. He's in it. He was in a secret society. The Loyal Order of the Moose. That's falls under the
He's a high-ranking Democratic politician.
Yeah. So I mean, so now him and another serial killer who I can't remember the name, but also had some weird shit that, in my opinion, had occultism tied to it. Like both of them, again, using a bar to acquire.
Yeah,
something.
Dahmer definitely was. Dahmer was kidnapping
Dahmer was
men from
also-
bars, often gay
yeah.
men, taking them back to his apartment, disposing their bodies, oftentimes in, I think, vats of acid. There's a lot of weird stuff that go around Dahmer.
Then I think it was him, because was he the one who had like the skulls and actually building like
Yep.
an altar?
Yep.
Him and Gacy have both had victims from, I think, the same fucking bar. And in my opinion, they're
Yeah.
both occultists. So it just seems like,
I mean, one's in
you know,
Milwaukee,
now
the
we're
other one's
talking
in
about
Chicago.
smiley
It's
face
not far
killers.
away. Yeah. The close geographical, area there. So I mean, it's again areas Chicago, Milwaukee. These are smiley face killer victim areas as well. So is there a larger occult atmosphere that exists in those towns and cities? I think it's possible.
I think
But
so, too.
and to answer your question real quick, this will be my last statement for you. We've got to close out here, Nick. It's been great conversating with you and Lisa, you as well. But in reference to the bands, I think there is, again, the traveling band aspect to it. One of the early victims, I don't think early, we'll call it 2006. Luke Holman, La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was a college basketball player, high school varsity quarterback, very athletic individual, very smart man as far as his grade point average, et cetera. Again, best of the best. He's at a bar there in La Crosse, a bar where numerous victims were last seen. Of the La Crosse victims, I believe 3 or 4 of the La Crosse victims were last at this bar in La Crosse. He gets into a fight with the band at that bar. They're all, they're in between sets or whatever. I think maybe they were even outside. He gets in an altercation. That altercation gets broken up. Later, he disappears. Right? He's found, I think, a week later or so in the Mississippi River, right adjacent to a mound there in La Crosse, and autopsy results would later show he had significant signs of defensive wounds and being assaulted. I think he had a head injury, like he'd been hit with something in the head. Of course, they ruled it an accidental death, drowning. During the investigation, they were doing, was searching for the man. At a checkpoint outside of La Crosse, a van was stopped. I believe it was the same van as the band's van from that night. And it tested the dogs hit on it for scent, and they found blood in the van. The state police did. La Crosse PD told the state police, let that van go.
Yeah.
So they let it go.
Yeah.
But that speaks to that's a scenario where a band was very likely involved in the murder of Luke Holman. And on top of that, I think about it, right around the same time in La Crosse, in around 2006, 2007, someone got busted with an obscene amount of GHB production. So gives you some examples of what might be going on here.
There have been band members that are suspects
sure.
in cases. So that's also part of it.
But it's a good way to get away from the crime because no one's gonna wonder why you left town. Of course you left town. You're part of the band. You're leaving. Yeah, and again, this is just a small band who played small tours at different college bars and stuff like that.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like I have 3 band members that I was with them at this time.
Nope.
I was a roadie.
We're all hanging out drinking.
Yeah, they may not even be the people singing or playing the music. They might be the lighting guy or the sound.
Yeah, fucking roadie. It could be roadies and carnies.
Yep.
Oh, thank you both very much. Actually, I do have one more question. Actually, Lisa, I don't know if you're into this, but you mentioned his name before. I have a question for you. Is he guilty, not guilty, or was somebody involved? Brian Kohlberger.
Oh, I mentioned his name.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think? That question's for you and Lisa, if Lisa knows who this even is.
No, I do know who it is. I don't. Oh man, I don't know. I'm on the fence for sure. Yeah. Because some of it is dead on, and some of it's like, no, he's probably not even involved at all. So yeah, I'm on the fence for sure.
And what do you think?
I'll go ahead and say not guilty. And I'll use a reference point. You can listen to Operation GCD podcast pod number 3. I published it about 6 weeks ago. I did it. It was a conversation I had with on the Farm podcast with host Recluse Steven Snyder. We actually did an update to that podcast. That's the recorded version. I was on a live show. He does a monthly live party, I think. I was on his monthly live party 2 weeks ago. I did an update on that case, and I'll be posting that here soon. As a recorded version of a podcast as well. I would say he's not guilty. All the forensics support that. The police are full of shit, and that strangely enough, in my opinion, that has connections to Silicon Valley Bank, FTX crypto coin, and this Othram company, which is this Silicon Valley company down there out of Austin that does DNA testing.
Yes.
And funded by Silicon Valley Bank, that Othram organization was. And FTX,
I'm gonna have to get you on for this.
Yeah, the FTX cryptocurrency situation. They bought a small rural bank, huge money laundering operation, obviously. And for whatever reason, they bought a small rural bank 30 miles outside of Moscow, Idaho. Again, I don't know what it is, but I largely suspect there's some large-scale drug trafficking operations involved in that environment within those college students, within the Greek society. And I have offered 6 or 7 different instances of not drug possession, drug trafficking within within the fraternities and sororities there. And I don't think Koberg has anything to do with it. He was an intern at the local police department across the border in Washington. I think they looked down the hallway and said, let's pin it on the intern.
Oh.
I really do, because they're so involved. They're so involved in it within the political structure there. But I'll leave you with this.
From day one, I thought that.
You agree?
From day one. Well, the thing, I don't. With Kohlberger, I totally believe. I do think there's a possibility he either had nothing to do with it, or it was him and multiple people. Like if he is guilty, he did not do it alone.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it.
That whole thing, I have said it since day one. There was either drugs and or prostitution.
Oh, both.
It's behind why there's people dead in that house.
Yeah, there's evidence of both of those things going on, actually.
Yeah.
So,
or a very pissed off sugar daddy.
So one last note on Moscow for you both, and relative to the smiley face killer. So I'll circle it back and bring that back here to a close. In May of 2022, there was a fellow by the name of Hudson Lindau. I believe he was a junior there at the University of Idaho. He went out to a fraternity party. So they can't have parties at the sorority houses. The fraternity houses have to host the sorority house parties. That makes sense. I think this was a sorority party, but it was at a fraternity house. So, and they all live in Greek Row there, where that murder house was. That's Greek Row on the campus, and just off the campus, all the Greek students who don't want to live on campus, they move right there in King Street and Queen Street, right where the murder house was. So all the neighbors there are all fraternity and sorority people, right? They all know each other. Yeah. They're all at a party. This Hudson Lindau guy was at the party. So were all the murder victims from the Moscow 1122 King Street murder house back in May of last year, right? Hudson Lindau goes missing from that party, fraternity party again, or sorority party at a fraternity house. Not his fraternity, but one of the neighboring fraternities. They find him, I think, 2 days later in the creek, dead of drowning. So I personally think that's some enterprising fraternity students who wanted to kill their fraternity brother or their fellow Greek, society brother for whatever reason. Could be connected to the large-scale drug trafficking and prostitution going on there. Maybe he wanted to, bring that to light. Who knows? There's not enough information available for me to make that conclusion. All I can say is I think enterprising fraternity students from the University of Idaho did a copycat smiley face killer murder, and again, no one investigated.
Maybe it was almost a copycat of Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper happened in 1880, and Idaho College was founded in 1889.
That's interesting.
Both girls that looked like, I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but you never know, they might have been around. So maybe it wasn't much different. Well, people just getting killed from Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, I mean,
and another thing, real quick,
to that house. So,
and real quick, and then we'll just wrap it up with this. You did mention it was Kings Road, 1122. I'm assuming
on the corner of King and Queen.
Yes, so you put that together. Well, either you put it together and you get 33, or if you want to keep going with that, the next number would be 33. And what building did Kohlberger live in his apartment complex?
33.
No, G. Well, maybe it was 33, but he was also in G building too.
Okay.
There's too much.
You're right.
Yeah.
There's too much with the fucking numbers at 417.
Yeah. So you think the G is the symbol of the Freemasonry G? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
I think besides if he really did it or not, with the gematria and the symbolism, there is a lot of fuckery with this one case.
You could also go the route of killing of the king ritual, right? 11/22,
Oh,
King,
that's right.
JFK,
Yeah,
11/22/63.
yeah, killing him. That's right. That's
Yeah,
you're
it's
spot
just
on
this
that
whole
one.
One
case
route to go with
just
it.
stinks
Uh,
like
I
real nasty shit.
I tend to agree with you. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I kind of frame it as I do a lot of comparing and contrasting with the O.J. Simpson case, the forensics, the public, the execution in the public media of both O.J. Simpson and now Brian Koberger. First of all, O.J. Simpson, if you're not familiar with it, he's not guilty. The forensics don't lie. The investigation doesn't lie. The judge lies. Wouldn't allow some of that stuff into court, right? In the Simpson case, the same people involved in prosecuting O.J. Simpson, literally Mark Furman and Marcia Clark, they're on the media prosecuting Brian Koberger all the time now in the court of public opinion. And there's a lot more. There's a lot of other correlations there, but that's just some of it.
I definitely sooner than later, because who knows what might happen with this case. I would love to get you back on actually to cover the Koberger case.
Sure.
I've wanted to do that. I've wanted to do that file. It's just like the one other person I know. They kind of do like internet radio as like full-time jobs, so like it's just like real hard to get them on my show.
I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I mean, like I said,
yeah, I'd love to actually have you. Yeah, I don't. You know what the thing is? I don't know too many people that I would think has enough info to talk on the case. If you know half of much of this case than you do about the smiley face killers, I'm totally
probably comparable.
Yeah, so I'm sure you'll do an excellent job. So yeah, after this, we'll definitely have to talk. I'd love to have you come on, talk about that, and even the mound stuff too. You know, I find that shit very, very interesting. And so thank you both for coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Nick for inviting me. Thanks Lisa for the conversation as well. I enjoyed the smiley face killer conversation here. Happy to come back. Happy to come back, talk mounts, talk Idaho stuff, and whatever you want to talk about.
Cool thing was too, I think we all threw out some a lot of it was a lot of spitballing, but I don't think those all should be like tossed as silly. I think we all really kind of added in our own way, our own theories that really kind of I think are, have some credit to them. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed all three of our angles at once covering this topic. So
yeah, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope that the listeners appreciate it too. And also thank you all the listeners that jumped into the chat. I saw that you had some comments going on. I appreciate that. That's why I go live. So yeah, thank you all for that as well. Till the next one, everybody be well.